we want to switch it up, and we actually have kind of a special presentation. Everyone's going to get kind of the feeling of being in a pro shop seminar here, and we're going to tackle the topic of HyperKinetic 22 technology,
how it came about, and where we're at with it, and why it came about.
Mhm.
You know,
Right.
so just to give it a little lead in, sort of, Coverstocks over the years, he started out with a rubber ball. Obviously, we all know about that. And then the first polyester ball came out, and Brunswick had polyester balls, and so did Columbia, up in Euphrates, Washington, on the Columbia River. That's where it was named Columbia. So in case somebody didn't know that, and they made a pearl colored polyester ball, and Brunswick copied them, infringed, and they had a lawsuit. And the lawsuit was against the patent on the pearl multicolored, the pearl polyester ball, or the colored polyester ball. Anyway, they couldn't afford to fight Brunswick, so Mr. Zeller, who was the original owner of Columbia, um, invested in Columbia itself, and then hired Mr. Herman, who was an attorney, to fight that lawsuit, and he won. He beat Brunswick for that. And for that, Mr. Zeller gave Mr. Herman half of the Columbia business at the time. They
So
moved it to San Antonio.
what does this have to do with HyperKinetic 22?
Well, here's what happened.
Is
You
this
see,
is this a long trip around to the point?
Yeah, we're going to get to the point. So, when that happened, all of a sudden, everybody wanted to have polyester balls. Every company that was wanted to have it. And then that evolved into, the rubber ball, then into urethane. So with urethane, it was simple. You bought urethane from a urethane company.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't a lot of variations of urethane.
Still 2 parts, right?
2 parts, A and B, right? And it wasn't that much of a difference, company to company. Then Brunswick put additives in, and you had particle. Then Columbia put an additive in, and you had particle. So it went and evolves to the point where now you have a resin ball come out that Steve Cooper invented for New Line. Okay. Now, again, it was a commodity. It was not chemistry as we know it today. It was, you bought this resin and you put it with a polyol and an isocyanate together, and you ended up with a reactive resin bowling ball. But once that happened, you couldn't extend it any further to get performance out of it. It was A and B, and they were 1-to-1 ratios. So your performance got pretty much the same across the board once they all figured it out. The companies that have chemists had advantages and still do. Now, not all companies have chemists. And usually you find something, the point I was making with the polyester, I'll get back to in a second. But the point is, when you start looking for something, there's a chance you're going to find something else.
Right.
In the case of Columbia with the polyester ball, they found the bleeder by mistake. That was the standard to polyester balls. And nobody's ball was close to the bleeder.
No.
None. It was by mistake. The guy found it. A chemist at Columbia found it by mistake. New Line found reactive resin by mistake. They got it from a company in South Carolina. They shipped it across the country, and they had to put additives in it because of the temperature change. Next thing you have reactive resin volleyball. So when you look at the things like the Purple Hammer, okay, that's a chemist that found that. It's not a urethane mix that you go buy a regular urethane bowling ball, and it's chemists that found the formulas. So when you sit there as a company like Brunswick, who has a chemist, and I think they're the only one that has a chemist on premises that works for the companies, the chemists look for product. They look for variations. They study the what's available and what's not available. They study additives.
Mm-hmm.
And you evolve what you have step by step by step by step. And eventually, and along the way, you're selling product with each step you're taking, but you eventually get to a point where you found something so different. And that's what happened with the HK22. It was a 2-year process.
Should we start with the slides?
Yeah, you might as well.
Okay.
Since we have them. Yeah. But you have a 2-year process in the making And what you're really trying to do is you're trying to hit a target. You know, obviously we acquired ebonite, and then we did a SWOT analysis, which is measuring your competition,
Strengths,
strengths,
weaknesses,
weaknesses, opportunities, and
opportunities,
threats.
threats.
Right. And you know, we knew that Storm had certain things that they had going for them. And on one end of the spectrum, they had better product than we did, but on the other end of the spectrum, we had better product than they did. So you start to look at what we know, what the chemists know, take the technology from ebonite, the technology from Brunswick, you put them in a room and you say, this is what we have and this is what we need.
This is
So
where
that
we
would
want to
be
get to.
right. An opportunity under the opportunity section. This is what we need. Okay. This is where we can excel. And you do that. And we did it for 2 years. I mean, working on this. One of our weaknesses, we had polyester, polished balls they didn't do what the other company's balls did, the polished ball. It needed more traction and oil without sanding it. And that's what the target was, period. Go find that, you know. And of course, you didn't want to lose the shelf appeal. You know, a shiny ball has to be pretty decent looking on the shelf, you know, whether it has to have the clarity to it or whatever. So, you know, we can.
And little did we know we were going up against a rigged deck when it come to shiny ball
Well,
performance.
yeah, you know, when the company has, and it ends up that you're right, the deck was a little rigged because the hardness wasn't there. You know, we could have made softer shiny balls that hooked, but we couldn't do it because of the USPC rules. But I guess it didn't pan out for everybody the way it should have.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
after acquisition, the goals obviously were to create the best possible Black Widow
Right.
and to recreate the purple urethane hammer, which were the two iconic bowling balls in the hammer
Right.
line. Must
Yeah.
get right. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Yeah, you got to get those two right. You know, the Black Widow and the Purple Hammer.
Right.
You know, and the only way to do the Purple Hammer the right way is to buy all of their equipment from ebonite, which we did, and buy the same resin, which we did, and make sure the chemistry was there from our chemists, and we hired the chemist from ebonite. So,
all right. So
here's
this
a
chart
chart
shows.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick. Go ahead.
At the time of our meeting in early 2020, this was our ball line at the time, with the first releases from the 4 new brands, or not 4 new brands, but the acquired brands. And the highlighted spot is where we wanted to get to with our performance.
Yeah, we were missing those target areas, you know, and under the requirements and the rules we played under, we couldn't get there.
Right. So the common denominator here is we wanted more angular bowling balls that were both aggressive and for drier lanes.
Correct.
All right, next.
Yeah, we can make them hook if we sanded them. We couldn't get them to go the way we wanted to. So the development for the Purple Hammer starts knowing that there's going to be some issues transitioning from the ebonite plant to the Brunswick plant. Had to optimize the chemistry, you know, and we tried to improve the polishing on that ball, which we figured out afterwards it wasn't going to happen. That ball was not going to polish. They implemented some of the ebonite processes to engineer the Black Widow. We did that. Then the pandemic slowed us down. We understand that. But then USBC announces a change to 73 hardness, January 22, for all new releases. So now all the balls that are manufactured after August 1st must now be 73 hardness. Right. So now we got to go back and re-engineer all of the work that we were doing on the Purple Hammer to make sure that the new ones are all 73 and above.
Right, because it's going to take us some time to get that ball to market.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
And side story with the gas mask core and Brunswick's technology and core processing, I should say, with how the cores are molded and demolded.
The side molding, right?
Yeah, so you know, Brunswick molding was always top bottom, where ebonite molding was side to side. So when you demold something from top bottom, the widest part of the ball has to be somewhere in the midsection. You can't have anything protruding out wide down below.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you won't be able to get it out of the mold. It'll be stuck in there. So with the gas mask core, the only way to make that is to demold it side to side, like Ebonite was doing in their facility, and that's something that we had never done, to my knowledge. So that's
right.
an interesting fact there. You know, we're you know, we weren't physically able to make a gas mask core until we, you know, obviously acquired the technology and the processes to do it.
Right. So once we get that developed, you know, that and now we have a new technology, we can make any shape core we want, because you start taking them out side to side, you could make any asymmetrical ball of any dimension, any shape, not a problem. But the biggest thing was to get the purple hammer right, and that was the biggest key, you know. So let me flip my page over here. So in March we realized that we're not going to get a polished version of the purple hammer.
Mhm.
Anybody that's tried to polish that ball realized you can't polish it. You can't. It's just very, very difficult. And the new 73 hardness rule goes into effect. So we could create the polished one, but it was too low. So now we have an entire process to start over, getting a new base cover stock with new chemistry. And that's where the chemists come in. So you take all the combination of the Ebonite guys, the Brunswick guys, and you start creating test balls. And actually what they did was at 16, they had two new bases to go off of, but they had 16 test balls between April and the end of June to try to get this right. 16 different variations, different hardness, different absorption, different cores. It was just chaos, and not the ball, but chaos. Trying to get the right combination, because every time you made an iteration, you know, yeah, well, what if we do this? What if we do this? What if we do this? So it was a 2-year process, to say the least. But in September, you know, after chemistry and fiddling around with it, we narrowed down to a couple of potential candidates for to optimize further. And here's the other part. So now you got these test balls that worked, and you might have 2 of them that are really good, and we're going to make some test balls, and we're going to throw them, and we're going to look at the performance and put them on Specto and get all of the analysis we want. How do we know those are going to be manufacturable?
Right.
At that point, how do you know that 2 months after they made, they're not going to pop? You don't know that. So you have to now, and Brunswick is the best at this, man. We're not going to make bad balls. It's just not going to happen. We're not going to make product that has manufacturing defects. So now we got to go through the optimizing section or segment where we constantly test these balls for hardness, durability, go down the list. And you know, we still had those 2 targets in mind. You know, we wanted them cleaner through the front and a stronger change of direction. That was the goal. Now that we have these two items that we think we have to prove that we can make them and they last for a long time. You know, adding traction in oil is much easier than getting a change of direction, because you could just, you know, scuff the surface up. We have mechanical, chemical friction already. We had that already. So and that was easy for us to get earlier and more hook. The problem was cleaner and sharper was more difficult, especially playing by the rules. So I just want to say that again. You know, when you have to stick to 72 and higher or 73 and higher, you have to give up something, and we just couldn't get it. We couldn't understand how other guys got it.
Scratch your head sometimes.
You sit there and wonder, how are they doing that? Well, now we know. But anyhow,
it's like figuring out Houdini's secret.
Yeah, secrets, right? Exactly.
Oh, he's palming it. Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly right.
Oh, yeah.
What's it? My cousin Vinny. Oh, yeah.
What's that? You ever have your 3-card monte game in Brooklyn on the stoop? Did you ever? Yeah.
Yeah, that. Well, he's palming a card. He's got the rope up his sleeve, you know. So we couldn't figure it out. So anyhow, we make some base resins. We start fiddling around with it. We come up with HK22. And if you show the next one, we suddenly had, at that point, this September, 3.5 balls fit into that circle that we put up there. We had none. You know, Defender Hybrid, the 3D attack, and the top speed, the brutal collision, all filled in that portion of the chart, which we couldn't do in the past. So you take HK22, you take the base resins that form HK22, and now you go back and apply all the knowledge you had before that on additives, and HK22 is the start of an entire new resin for the industry. It's not the same as reactive resin. It doesn't pour the same. You know, it's not the same as you can say anybody else's resin is.
It doesn't take color the same either.
And it doesn't. It's very clear. So this took 2 years to get there. It's worth the wait because now that's the #1 resin in the industry by a lot. It's not even close.
The #1 ball. And this presentation is actually a little bit old. It doesn't show what's possibly the most popular ball of 2023 so far.
Right.
Black Widow 2.0 hybrid.
Absolutely right. And of course, this is an older presentation. But, you know, we put that on the Bigfoot hybrid, the Katana Assault, and the Outer Limits so far.
Which all came out after this.
Which all came out after this. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. This was the fall seminar series, correct?
Exactly right. So, you know, we got things we're working on. We're working on Rattlers. We're working on another Katana. We're working on, you know, the next version of the Outer Limits because we have all of the variations that we can go with. We have new core designs. We tested one 2 weeks ago that was absolutely incredible. You know, and you start looking at the next level. We go back and now look at some of the older cores we had that were reasonably old, not very old, and realize that they became a new bowling ball when you put HK22 on it.
Sure.
With some of the variations. So we continue to explore other options.
Yeah, if you look at even Black Widow 2.0 hybrid versus Black Widow Ghost, which was a pearl versus a hybrid.
Correct.
Everybody will tell you that the Ghost is just a little bit earlier and smoother compared to a 2.0 hybrid.
Right.
And that's that HK22 at work. It's the same core.
Sure.
Same surface prep.
Right. Now, one of the interesting things, Nick, and I want to mention to everybody is, you know, I mentioned all the steps along the way. You know, we might have had 16 iterations from when we started, and it was 16 iterations. But iteration 11 was better than iteration 9. And that might have been better than maybe what we had a year ago. So some of the balls we came out with that are not called HK22, but they're HK22 iterations. And one of the examples is the Motion Magic Coverstock that's on the Trailblazer Solid. That was an iteration right before we came up with the HK22s. You know, so you start looking at some of the stuff that we come out with that has that doesn't say HK22, but it's probably number 13 or number 14. It just didn't get to be, you know, number 16. Sure. It's not bad, and it matches up perfectly with the core. So we have all of those iterations as well to use. We're way far ahead of anybody else in the industry right now when it comes to cover stocks
and we got
durability.
We got a good question earlier. Says, do you think HK22 balls might be too responsive in some cases where you wouldn't want that? Like my GB4 hybrid hooks way too hard on the back end for a ball that should be a benchmark.
Okay, so you could simply change that surface, right, and make it a little smoother.
Right. You know? What I was getting at is, you know, not every ball we make has HK22 technology into it. We're still going to produce balls that don't have it to give you the widest range of spectrum. You know, we don't want every ball to be up at the top tier of that chart. You know, we're still going to produce balls that are smoother. We're still going to, you know, slower, more control, just flat out overall hook, you know, skid snap for dry lanes, you know, smoother for dry lanes. We're going to create that full range spectrum of bowling ball performance. So in the case of GB4 hybrid, you know, that is an angular ball. And yes, you can dull it. But if you were looking, you know, for maybe something that is a little smoother, the GB2 would have been a better pick because that's more slow and smooth and was kind of like that traditional benchmark motion. But the GB4 hybrid is still a benchmark type motion. But when you want something a little more angular, you know, it's still going to be in that mid-range of hook performance, total hook. But it obviously is going to be a little bit more responsive and hook on the back end than a GB2.
Well, you look at the Outer Limits, that's a somewhat dull pearl ball because when it was shiny in that state that it would have been was ridiculously off the spot. So, we made it to be more of a control motion down lane. But again, like Nick said, not every ball is going to have HK22. It's just a chemical compound that we use. It's so different than anything else we have. There was a lot of time put into it. We have more shelf appeal. It's more aggressive off the spot. It's cleaner. It looks good. And it's 2 years worth of technology. And it's just the start of the new base technologies that we have.